Megan had one goal: keep Jake by her side at any cost. When she sensed him slipping away, she spun a dangerous lie, claiming she was pregnant with his child. But when Jake uncovered the truth, the fragile thread holding their relationship snapped, unleashing a chain of events that would end in his tragic murder and leave a town forever haunted by the darkness hidden beneath love's disguise. Megan Collins grew up in a quiet Georgia town where everyone knew each other by name and secrets were hard to keep. She was the type of person who craved connection, always searching for someone to fill a void she couldn't quite explain. Her relationships never lasted long. Friends came and went. Lovers left as quickly as they arrived. Underneath her outgoing personality was a fear of being forgotten, of being abandoned. That fear followed her everywhere. When she met Jake Turner, she thought maybe things would finally be different. Jake had moved to town after a difficult breakup in Atlanta. He wasn't looking for anything serious, just a fresh start and some peace of mind. He was tall, quiet, and a little reserved, the kind of man who didn't speak much unless he had something meaningful to say. He spent most of his time at the local bookstore or walking the trails outside town. Megan noticed him long before he noticed her. She began showing up where she knew he'd be: coffee shops, parks, even his gym. She was strategic but subtle. When they finally crossed paths at the bookstore, it felt organic. She asked about the book in his hand, and the conversation flowed. From that moment on, Megan was hooked. They started dating casually. Megan was smitten right away, while Jake was slower to commit. He liked her, but he wasn't ready to dive into something serious again. Megan, however, had already begun building a future in her mind. She pictured holidays together, late-night talks, and eventually a family. The more time they spent together, the deeper she fell. But Jake remained distant, even after months of dating. He was kind, attentive in his own way, but emotionally guarded. Megan sensed something was missing, something she couldn't fix. No matter how hard she tried. As the weeks passed, Jake began to pull away. He canceled plans more often. His texts became shorter. Megan grew anxious. She couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Her mind spiraled with what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. Every moment of silence from Jake felt like confirmation that he was preparing to leave. That's when the idea came. If Jake was slipping away, maybe there was one thing that could make him stay: a baby. Not a real one, not yet, but the promise of one. It started as a desperate thought, but quickly became a plan. Megan believed she could control the narrative, win Jake back, and secure the future she had imagined. What she didn't realize was how quickly that lie would spiral out of control. Megan didn't waste time once the idea took root. Within days of sensing Jake's distance, she claimed she was pregnant. It happened over text, a short, carefully worded message that left no room for questions. "I just found out. I'm pregnant." She sat frozen for minutes after hitting send, staring at her phone, waiting for Jake's reply. When it finally came, "Are you sure?" she breathed a sigh of relief. That wasn't anger. It wasn't panic. It was concern, maybe even commitment. It was enough to keep her going. Jake's reaction wasn't overjoyed, but he didn't leave. He came over that night. He didn't say much, just held her for a long time. Megan leaned into it, letting herself believe she had done the right thing. The next day, she told her two closest friends, who responded with cautious excitement. She made it real quickly, buying pregnancy tests and throwing away the boxes, leaving vitamins on the kitchen counter, and downloading an app that tracked imaginary weeks of growth. She knew just enough to sound convincing. The internet became her guide. Forums, blogs, and videos taught her what symptoms to mention, what excuses to give, and how to avoid doctor appointments altogether. Jake's presence became more consistent after the announcement. He stayed over more often and helped her with groceries. He started talking about the future in vague terms. "We'll figure this out," or "I'll be here for the baby." Megan latched onto every word. She took it as proof that her plan had worked. The fear that once consumed her was replaced with a strange sense of control. She had managed to stop him from leaving, at least for now, but keeping up the lie proved more difficult than starting it. When Jake offered to come to her first doctor appointment, she told him the clinic didn't allow visitors due to new policies. When he asked to see an ultrasound, she showed him an image she had saved from a random blog. She told him the baby was small, that it was still early. Every question he asked brought a new challenge, a new lie to invent. And with each one, the guilt started to gnaw at her. But she pushed it down, telling herself it was worth it, if she could just keep it going a little longer. Maybe Jake would fall in love with her fully. Maybe he'd propose. Maybe, just maybe, the fake pregnancy could become a real family. What Megan didn't know was that Jake was already starting to suspect something was wrong. The little inconsistencies were adding up, and what started as a shaky relationship built on fragile trust was slowly turning into a ticking time bomb. In the weeks that followed, Megan clung tightly to the fantasy she had created. She continued to post subtle hints on social media, pictures of baby name books, cryptic captions about new beginnings, and occasional check-ins at maternity clinics, though she never actually set foot in one. Her friends, though puzzled by her lack of a visible bump, didn't press her much. Megan brushed off questions with excuses about a rare condition that delayed physical changes. It was just enough to quiet suspicion for a while. Jake, however, was starting to see through the cracks. He noticed Megan always had a reason why he couldn't go to appointments. One week, it was a rescheduled visit. The next, it was a doctor who supposedly didn't allow partners in the room. He tried to be understanding, but the red flags kept piling up. The more questions he asked, the more evasive Megan became. He caught her slipping once, mentioning a due date that didn't line up with the timeline she'd originally given. When he asked about it, she quickly corrected herself, blaming it on stress and confusion. Jake nodded, but the moment stayed with him. The ultrasound photo nagged at him the most. Something about it felt too polished, too generic. One night while Megan was asleep, he quietly searched for similar images online. It didn't take long for him to find an exact match on a pregnancy forum posted 2 years earlier. His stomach dropped. He refreshed the page again and again, hoping he was wrong. But the photo was identical, down to the smallest shadows. That was the moment everything began to shift. Jake didn't confront Megan right away. Instead, he started observing her more closely. He began checking trash bins for appointment cards or medical paperwork. He noticed there were none. Her vitamin bottles were full, unopened. She never complained about common pregnancy symptoms anymore. It was as if she had stopped pretending when she thought he wasn't looking. The deeper he dug, the more inconsistencies he found. The lie, once so carefully maintained, was beginning to fall apart under its own weight. Still, Megan remained convinced she was in control. She believed she could keep Jake tethered to her with just enough emotion and guilt. She had no idea he had already started distancing himself emotionally, preparing for the truth he was now certain of. Every fake smile she offered, every excuse she gave, only confirmed what he already knew: there was no baby. And soon, he would confront her. Jake had always been patient, but patience has its limits. By the time he found the ultrasound image online, his mind was nearly made up. He didn't want to believe Megan could lie about something so serious, but the facts were stacking up against her. Still, he needed absolute certainty before walking away from what could have been his child. Quietly, without telling her, Jake contacted a friend who worked part-time at the local women's clinic, the one Megan claimed she'd been visiting. With a strained voice, he asked a simple question: had Megan Collins ever been seen there? The answer came just as simply: no, there was no record of her. Not under that name or any variation of it. For Jake, it was the final piece of the puzzle. He sat in his car for a long time afterward, struggling with a mix of disbelief and anger. The betrayal cut deep. He thought of all the nights he had stayed by her side, all the talks about the future, all the quiet moments filled with what now felt like nothing but manipulation. A fake pregnancy. A fabricated life. It was almost too much to process. But once the shock wore off, only one thing remained. He had to leave. He didn't want a scene. He didn't want to fight. He planned to sit her down, explain what he knew, and walk away with whatever dignity he had left. But when he confronted Megan, things didn't go as planned. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try to lie. Instead, she broke down sobbing, crumbling under the truth she could no longer hold together. She said she had been scared, terrified of losing him, and that she never meant for things to go so far. She begged for another chance, promised to get help, swore she could still be the woman he needed. But Jake had already checked out. Her tears didn't move him this time. He told her it was over, that he was done, that he couldn't trust her, and that he wouldn't be a part of any more lies. Megan listened in silence, her expression unreadable. She nodded slowly. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. But something in her eyes changed just for a second. Jake saw it. A flicker of something dark. Something cold. He left her apartment. That night, thinking it was the end of the story. But for Megan, it was the beginning of something else. The lie that was meant to bring them together had been exposed. And now, all she had left was the fear of losing everything. In the days after Jake ended the relationship, Megan drifted into silence. She stopped answering calls, avoided friends, and barely left her apartment. Her world, once tightly controlled by the lie she had spun, was unraveling. Without Jake, the fantasy crumbled. The imagined future, the baby that never existed, the life she had built inside her mind, all of it was gone. But instead of accepting the loss, Megan began to plot. Her heartbreak turned into obsession. Her desperation curdled into something darker. She watched Jake from a distance, tracking his movements through social media and mutual friends. She saw photos of him smiling again, spending time with coworkers, and even reconnecting with old friends from Atlanta. The more she saw, the more convinced she became that he was moving on too easily. To Megan, that felt like betrayal. In her eyes, he wasn't just walking away from her. He was throwing away everything she had given up to keep him. It wasn't just rejection. It was punishment. And she couldn't accept it. Megan started keeping a journal, pages filled with angry thoughts, imagined conversations, and plans that read like warnings. She wrote that if she couldn't be with Jake, no one should be. She imagined confronting him one final time, making him understand the pain he had caused. She didn't see her actions as wrong. In her mind, she was the victim, the one who loved too hard, the one who was left behind. On a cold Thursday night, Megan drove to a 24-hour store just outside town. She bought duct tape, cleaning supplies, gloves, and a large kitchen knife. The cashier didn't question her. It was late, and Megan smiled politely as she paid in cash. She drove back home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from focus. Something inside her had shifted. She wasn't trying to win Jake back anymore. She was preparing. To make sure he couldn't leave her behind, the next day, Megan went about her routine like nothing had changed. She posted a photo of coffee and flowers with a hopeful caption. She smiled at a neighbor in the hallway. No one saw the storm brewing. Beneath the surface, she was calm, collected, and ready. Jake, unaware of what was coming, had begun packing up his place to return to Atlanta. He told friends he was relieved to have the truth out. He thought the worst was over. But Megan wasn't done. Not yet. In her mind, there was still one final chapter to write. And it would be written in blood. Jake never showed up for work the following Monday. His absence was unusual. He was reliable, always on time, never the type to disappear without notice. At first, his coworkers thought he might be sick or taking a personal day. But when texts went unanswered and calls went straight to voicemail, concern quickly grew. By the afternoon, one of his friends drove to his house to check on him. Jake's car was still in the driveway, and the lights inside the home were off. The front door was locked. Something felt wrong. The friend called the police to request a welfare check. When officers arrived, they knocked several times with no response. Given the circumstances, they forced entry. What they found inside would haunt them for weeks. The house was eerily silent, but signs of a struggle were immediately visible. A shattered glass lay on the floor near the couch. A lamp had been knocked over, and a dark stain had soaked into the edge of the rug. There was no sign of Jake in. The kitchen, a knife was missing from the block. A trail of faint, smeared blood led from the living room toward the back door. Panic turned to dread as officers realized this wasn't just a disappearance, it was a crime scene. They searched the property, the garage, the backyard. Still no sign of Jake. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. But someone had gone. Through great lengths to make it look that way, as investigators began piecing together the scene. They found Jake's phone tucked between couch cushions, its screen cracked. The last call was from Megan placed just the night before. It lasted only 2 minutes. When officers contacted her, she didn't answer. But she had been seen earlier that day, walking out of a gas station on the edge of town, alone and looking disheveled. The timeline was narrowing. Suspicion turned quickly to certainty. A local tip came in the next morning. Someone had spotted a woman matching Megan's description near an abandoned farmhouse about 20 miles outside town. Police responded immediately. The building, long since forgotten, sat at the edge of a wooded property. Inside, in a cold and dusty back room, they found Megan sitting on the floor. She was quiet, her clothes stained with dried blood. And beside her, motionless, was Jake. He had been stabbed multiple times. The weapon, the same knife missing from his kitchen, was lodged in his chest. The room was silent except for the sound of officers drawing their weapons and calling for backup. Megan didn't resist. She didn't speak. She simply stared ahead, as if the horror around her hadn't fully registered, or perhaps as if it had been exactly what she planned all along. The discovery of Jake's body sent shockwaves through the quiet town. News spread fast, and by that evening, his photo was on every local channel, accompanied by the chilling headline, "Local man found murdered ex-girlfriend in custody." For many who knew Megan, disbelief was their first reaction. She had always seemed emotional, even fragile, but never violent. No one could reconcile the image of the smiling woman they knew with the brutal reality now tied to her name. Investigators quickly began to piece together the timeline. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed Megan purchasing fuel and snacks just hours before she was found at the farmhouse. Her car was located half a mile from the scene, hidden behind a cluster of trees. Inside, police found bloodied clothing, a journal filled with obsessive writings about Jake, and a printed photo of the fake ultrasound she had once shown him. The evidence painted a clear picture of premeditation. The farmhouse itself held more than just the crime scene. Detectives uncovered a sleeping bag, food wrappers, and Megan's phone, which contained a series of unsent text messages to Jake. Some were loving, begging him to come back. Others were angry, accusatory, and disturbing in tone. It was clear she had spent hours, possibly days, planning what she believed would be their final encounter. Her mind had spiraled past heartbreak and into delusion, and in that state, she had committed the unthinkable. Megan was taken into custody without incident. At the station, she was calm, detached, and answered questions only when she chose to. During her initial interviews, she offered no apology, no visible remorse. When asked why she had done it, she gave vague responses about being pushed too far and not wanting to be alone again. Her behavior disturbed even the most seasoned officers. One detective described her as emotionally hollow, like she had already accepted her reality before she even acted. Jake's autopsy revealed he had been killed quickly, likely within minutes of arriving at the farmhouse. He had defensive wounds on his hands, showing that he fought back. But Megan had the element of surprise. Authorities believed she lured him there under the pretense of talking things through, perhaps even suggesting reconciliation. But the prosecution countered with her careful planning. They highlighted the fake ultrasound, the timing of her purchases, and the deliberate way she lured Jake to the farmhouse. Her actions, they argued, weren't impulsive, they were premeditated. The jury listened to every detail, each day more difficult than the last. Photos of the crime scene, Megan's chilling journal entries, and the soft-spoken testimony of Jake's friends painted a devastating picture. When closing arguments ended, the courtroom sat in heavy silence. The verdict came after just 4 hours, guilty of first-degree murder. Megan showed no visible reaction as the sentence was read life in prison without the possibility of parole. The lie that began with a text message had ended in a lifetime behind bars. The aftermath of the trial left the small town shaken to its core. The story of Megan and Jake wasn't just a headline. It became a cautionary tale whispered in homes, told at school hallways, and debated in coffee shops. People struggled to understand how a lie meant to keep someone close could end in such tragedy. Families who had once welcomed Megan with open arms now kept their distance, unsure how to reconcile the person they thought they knew with the cold-blooded killer she became. Jake's family was devastated beyond words. They mourned not only the loss of a beloved son and brother, but the cruel betrayal he had suffered in his final days. In the weeks after the trial, they held a memorial service that brought together hundreds of people, all trying to find some meaning in the senselessness. Friends shared memories of Jake's kindness, his quiet strength, and the future he had dreamed of before Megan shattered it. Many described him as a man who deserved better, a victim of manipulation and heartbreak. Turned deadly, Megan was moved to a maximum security prison, where she faced the reality of her life behind bars. The woman who had once fabricated a pregnancy to save a relationship was now serving a life sentence for murder. Her days became routine, filled with quiet reflection, legal appeals, and visits from a few loyal family members who struggled to understand what had gone wrong. Psychologists who evaluated her noted a complex mix of personality disorders, including borderline traits and deep-seated abandonment fears, but none could justify the violence she had inflicted. For many in the town, the story raised painful Questions about the signs that had been missed. How could someone so desperate for love spiral into such darkness? Could Jake have done something differently? Could Megan have gotten help before it was too late? These questions lingered, unanswered, a reminder of the fragile line between love and obsession. In the years that followed, the case became a subject for true crime podcasts, documentaries, and books, each exploring the layers of deception, mental illness, and tragedy. But for those who lived it, the friends, family, and community, the wounds never fully healed. The memory of Megan's calculated lies and Jake's tragic end remained a haunting shadow, a painful lesson on how far someone can fall when desperation turns deadly. It was a story that began with hope, but ended in heartbreak, forever etched. In the town's history, years passed since the tragedy that tore apart the quiet town, yet the story of Megan and Jake lingered like a dark cloud over the community. For many, it became a permanent scar, a reminder of how fragile trust can be and how a single lie can destroy lives. The case continued to be referenced in conversations about mental health, relationships, and the dangers of unchecked obsession. It sparked awareness campaigns aimed at helping those struggling with emotional instability and raising funds for counseling services in local schools and community centers. Megan remained behind bars, her life a far cry from the one she had once imagined. Prison visits were infrequent, mostly from distant relatives who grappled with feelings of sorrow and guilt. Megan's demeanor had changed little over the years, quiet, withdrawn, sometimes haunted by the weight of her actions. Psychologists noted that while she accepted responsibility in some ways, she never fully grasped the consequences of her choices on Jake's family or the community. Her world had become isolated and confined, just like the lies she once told had boxed her into a corner from which there was no escape. Jake's memory, on the other hand, lived on vividly. Friends and family honored him with scholarships in his name, charity runs, and community gatherings focused on healing and connection. They worked tirelessly to turn tragedy into something positive, determined to keep his spirit alive. His story was shared widely not just as a tale of heartbreak, but as a warning and a call to pay attention to the signs of emotional distress in those around us. The farmhouse where Jake was found was eventually demolished, erasing the physical space of the crime, but never the emotional scars. Locals often passed by the empty lot with heavy hearts, a silent tribute to what had happened there. It became a place of reflection, where the community collectively mourned and hoped for healing, though Megan's actions were unforgivable. Her story also forced the town to confront difficult truths about love, mental health, and the lengths people go to avoid loneliness. It sparked conversations about the importance of seeking help, recognizing warning signs, and building support systems. The tragedy became a catalyst for change, a painful but necessary reminder that sometimes beneath the surface of ordinary lives, extraordinary darkness can hide. In the end, the story of Megan and Jake was more than a crime. It was a lesson about trust broken and lives shattered, a lesson about the consequences of deception and desperation, and most importantly, a lesson about the fragile human heart, how it can both give and take away everything in the blink of an eye.